Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Sound. As always, I am your host, Jamison Foster, and today we are ecstatic to welcome back none other than Carr to the channel. Alla, of course, was this channel's very first guest back in 2022, and in a lot of ways helped build this platform into what it is today just by taking that chance on this strange bearded American. A world champion clog fiddler and what I would call a face of the Cittern, Alla is one of the three minds behind Dreamers Circus, and he is joining us today from sunny, balmy California to talk about their new album, the Handed On Project, and of course the US tour that is beginning today, actually. So, Alla, welcome back to the channel, my friend. It is great to have you.
Thank you. What an introduction.
I've been working on it.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, did you ever take your clog fiddling championship back? I remember last time we talked, I couldn't remember which one you
Right.
had.
Yeah, I did actually. I took it back from my father actually last year. So yeah,
That takes a family feud to a different level.
it does. Yeah, my mother, she won twice. My sister, I think, twice as well. My
Mhm.
cousin won once, and
Yeah.
and I have it for the third time now.
Awesome, man. Yeah, so it's a
Yeah.
family business. I finally got to hear it for the first time when Runa actually brought it to
Hmm.
Boulder when the string quartet played at the Chautauqua House in Boulder last August, I think.
Hmm.
They played Once a Shoemaker. And so I actually got to hear it for the first time in person, and it's just out of this world.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, he borrowed it for the tour and the recording. So
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
it's a beautiful piece. It definitely adds a lot to that. But we are not here to talk about the Danish String Quartet.
Mhm.
We're here to talk about Dreamers Circus and the tour. So you just arrived here today. You were telling me about your strategies for dealing with jet lag. But I guess my first question would be, actually, you know what? Let's start more basically. What are your stops on this tour? Because I am going to be posting this today to help, maybe bring some more people to the tour.
Right. I'm currently in Modesto,
Mhm.
just it's east of San Francisco, and we have a couple of drives here in in California. Luckily, Julian, our sound engineer, he loves driving these massive American cars.
Yep.
So we have one of these Chevrolet Suburbans, I think you call them.
Oh, yep.
Yeah, one of these kind of FBI vans, I guess. So we're just gonna drive around up and down. It's a little bit tricky, like routing, but
Hmm.
like we're driving to La Jolla tomorrow,
Okay.
you
Oh,
know. So
that's quite a drive.
that's a drive. I think it's like 8 hours or something, and then actually back up again to San Francisco the day after. And then we have a few dates in Seattle and we
Hmm.
play in Portland. And then our first gig in Minneapolis. It's
Awesome.
going to be fun. And end off in Longwood Gardens, which is an amazing place in Pennsylvania.
Cool, man. Yeah, yeah, that is my neck of the woods. I was raised in Maryland, so
Mm.
I'm right over the border from Pennsylvania. Yeah, no, so I saw that you were playing the Pacific Northwest, and actually, believe it or not, the largest share of the Nordic Sound's audience geographically is the Pacific
That's so
Northwest.
interesting.
Like it's still minor percentages considering the geographic scope, right? But it's
Mhm.
still, I've always noticed that that area has
Mm.
a pretty large interest in Scandinavian culture, despite the fact that Minneapolis and Minnesota usually get
Mm.
most of the airtime as the stereotypical like Scandinavian
Mhm.
immigrant region. But there's a lot of interest in the Pacific Northwest there. So I guess I would use that to segue into the question I was going to ask.
Mhm.
What is it like touring the States as just a Scandinavian artist? Like because a lot of us are on the receiving end. We're the Americans that are watching, and I'm wondering what it's like on your end. Sort of coming all the way over here and finding out that people are actually fairly interested in what three knuckleheads from Scandinavia have to play.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, this is I counted it some time ago. We this is our seventh tour now in the US, and so we've got our fair share of experiences by now, and it's funny a country like this where you have such wealth of diversity, right? So we constantly meet people who go like, oh well, my grandfather's grandmother is from Norway,
Yep.
and then because of that, they relate to me as a Swedish person, or like I went to Finland once, or I've been to Europe, or like they like to have this connection,
Hmm.
and many people do have this connection,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's really really nice to experience, that people really care about their roots somehow. Um, and so, as someone coming from a place, and we're playing roots music to a large degree, um, that's something that they can connect to. So that's nice to kind of be a facilitator for that. Um, yeah, so that's really nice. And another thing on a more personal note is that you quite often actually find yourself like in a deja vu moment, like, hey, I've seen this place before, you know, or I've seen that person before.
Yep.
And that's the movie scene, relation. So, you've seen so many of these places before in movies and series, and characters, like people, personalities, the way you guys, like, you actually talk this way, like it's not just in the movies, like, and
I had one of
and
those.
I mean, that's a compliment. Like,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not.
Yeah, of course. No, I actually had that happen to me for the first time when I was in Norway last summer.
Mhm.
I go there every August, and for the very first time, I was striking up small talk as Americans do, and this guy told me, "Wow, you sound just like they do in the movies." And I got this
That's
confidence boost. I was like, I sound like an actor. But then I was like, I've never heard that comment before,
yeah,
and that's when I really started to realize, like, that's right. Like Hollywood, like American cinema
yeah,
is like a global thing. And so if you hear an American talk, you'd be like, oh, it's like the movies.
yeah.
Yeah, so I experienced that. And what I also like about what you just said is you put a very positive spin on something that usually Americans are more critical of themselves, is the idea of be like,
Mhm.
oh, you're from Sweden. I went to Finland once. It's the same place,
Mhm.
right? And I have a lot of students when they take Nordic studies classes. They say, oh, I'm whatever percent Norwegian, so I can't wait to like go over there and kind of go home. And I really try to caution them against like
Mhm.
it's not really how it is. But I love that you have the spirit for it. But I
Mhm.
find that I have to like sort of caution my students, especially to don't act like you're from there. Like be appreciative of your roots, but it can be a little awkward. Like when you show up and be like, I'm from Norway, and then they can't speak Norwegian.
Yeah, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of cute in a way. Like, it's fine.
I
Like,
love that. No, cute is a
yeah,
good word because
yeah.
yeah. That's good,
It's,
man.
I think it's fine.
I love your positive outlook because as
Yeah.
we're about to talk about, Americans can get a little jaded.
Mhm.
So yeah, so the seventh tour.
Mhm.
What do you remember? What year was the first one?
Yeah, I was 19. We were forced, like, when you apply to perform and work in
Mhm.
the US, you have to write every last time you've been here and stuff. So I just refreshed my memory.
Oh yeah, but yeah, you had to deal with the visa stuff. Yeah, my condolences.
Yeah,
But yeah, so 19 years. Is there anything that you've noticed in maybe like the change
19
in?
years,
I'm sorry, did you say 19 years or was it just 19 tours?
2019.
Ah, I thought you were saying 19 years, and that's why I made that face. I was like, "Whoa, that's a
No,
long. That's
no,
way
no,
longer than I
no,
thought."
no,
No,
no. I'm
okay,
I'm not that old.
okay. That's. I was doing the math in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you for the correction. So even then, no. So that's like six. That's like 6 years, and even over that amount of time, I've noticed a change. But I'm curious from your perspective. Um, has there been any like notable change in, I don't know, like habits or just the ways that people are perceiving Nordic music or Nordic culture in general, that you've witnessed over these 6 years, not 19?
In the US, I don't think I've noticed a big difference
Okay.
personally.
Hmm.
I've noticed it in Denmark for sure.
Hmm.
But in the US, I mean, we've we've played primarily in the same places. Like we've
Okay.
went back to the same menu several times, as that's the same for this tour.
Hmm.
Um, and which I guess is a good thing they want us back.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I don't think so, to be honest. I think
Okay.
it's been a similar reception, similar reaction, and if anything, we've been the ones changing, because that's what you do as a creative artist.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, what were you thinking of? Like,
Well, so I just noticed, especially because, as you've probably seen, like I get very involved in like the Viking side of things, especially
hmm,
teaching it, but also the music side of it. That if we do have the time to talk about Olav Mjelva, he was on the Sjuksal project with Einar Selvik and Ivar Bjørnson, which was
hmm,
also a huge part of the growing interest in Vikings. You know what I mean, from the TV show. So I get curious if that also translates to the traditional folk or the just the roots music side of things,
hmm.
because that's exploded since 2019 for sure.
Yeah,
And so yeah, so I was just curious if you notice at least maybe reverberations or maybe a parallel interest on the other side, because to me it would be ideal if it also translated into more interest in the root side of things.
yeah.
But
No, no, exactly. It's something I've been a part of a substantial project the last few years. We've made this think tank over in Denmark, and Norway and Sweden, where we were talking about the brand of Nordic music. And one of the things we identified as an opportunity is that Viking thing, which is
hmm.
super strong. And Olaf Mjelva is certainly involved in that. Although we've yet to really see a big difference in terms of audiences, in terms
Yeah.
of streaming,
Hmm.
numbers. I don't think it's we've really been able to, gain from it
Hmm.
yet, but hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, man, that's actually one of my biggest challenges or projects that I put onto myself. Is I really try and do what I can to have that translate into an interest as someone who straddles both, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm very also into the Viking stuff just because it's fun and they're like artistically, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it would be really cool if it translated. So I try and like do what I can to maybe try and thread similarities. But it's a big project.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the major similarities might be uh, that it's from this place on the planet,
Yep.
which
Hmm.
is kind of, because one of the major, I don't, this might be a sideline, but one of the major discussions that we've had regarding this branding of Nordic folk music is what is it? What is
Yep.
Nordic music? And is it Nordic folk music or Nordic music or Nordic roots music, or what do we call it, and
Hmm.
what does it sound like?
Hmm.
And the fact is that the diversity within this music is so vast that it doesn't make sense to try to explain what it sounds like. So the only real way to the only fair way to
Hmm.
explain what it is that it's music that has some kind of roots in this place, and that's kind of it. So in that definition, sure, Viking music is in the same bucket, right? So if that's the reason people listen to the music, though, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But they might listen to it, watch it because they like big guys with swollen muscles and
Oh yeah,
and
we go
and
weak.
axes. Exactly. Who doesn't? I've played my fair share of Skyrim, and I
Yeah,
know it. Who hasn't?
beautiful, man. Yeah, I mean, like my listeners might actually be a little hungover on this exact conversation of what is Nordic folk music,
Hmm.
just because it is something that I've just because I think you're right. It with this whole Viking music thing, it's very dependent on who's making it, at least in as someone who's listening to it, because something like Vardruna, Einar Selvik,
Hmm.
is very, he interacts with folk musicians a lot.
Hmm.
Olav Mjelva is a great example of it.
Hmm.
So you can make more of an argument there that there's like that engagement with tradition that is, the how some of us might define folk music. Again,
Hmm.
big. big
Yeah,
conversation.
it's a
But
huge
yeah,
conversation.
yeah. But then there are other people who just listen to metal and then play it on acoustic instruments and call it folk music, and then that is
Yeah,
also another conversation. Like, is that right? But no, right. That would take up all of our time. But I'm actually really
absolutely.
glad. You actually have no idea how happy I am to know that you're also thinking about this sort of stuff on the other side. Because just as a very small anecdote, Maria Franz, the singer for Heilung, who was one of those bands that is, called Nordic Folk. She's like, I don't know why they call it that. Like, it's,
Hmm.
so it's everyone is thinking about this, and I look forward to seeing it talked about more, with the understanding that like no one gets a definitive say. But I just
Yeah.
think conversation is good.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I
Yeah.
think well, I think one of the one of the reasons why it becomes a heated topic
Hmm.
is that people come from it from different angles, and they have different understandings of the purpose of having this term and what they want to use it for. Is it a branding exercise? Do we want new audiences? Are we trying to describe the music? Is this an identifier? Do I have to feel that my music is like this? And, I don't want to be in the same group as those people and blah, blah, blah. So it all depends on on where you're coming from and what you want to use it for. So this is the more kind of
Hmm.
educated approach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not about music ethnology. No, is
Hmm.
that the word?
Ethnomusicology,
Yeah,
ethnology,
yeah.
ethnography, whatever, man. It's
You know what I mean.
whatever ethno word.
The ethno thing. So, and I think that's where most people in my camp are
Hmm.
coming from,
Yep.
because they feel that folk music, when you say it like that, it's music for dancing, it's 18th, 19th century fiddle music, and that's what that is. And
Hmm.
it's not Viking metal,
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
what? And when, etc. So it all that's the reason why you know it's difficult
It is,
because
yeah, it is very difficult. At the very least, I just wanted to point out that it is amazing to me that both you and someone like the singer of Heilung are both thinking about these things, and I think that's beautiful.
yeah.
So before we let that take up any other time, I just one last thing, yeah, that I wanted to bring up on the tour side of things, before we get to talking about the Handed On project and all of that, is we were talking about how it's weird being an American right now.
Hmm.
The states are in a tough place. It's actually, this has come up without me bringing it up in my last four interviews I've done. It just naturally comes up, and I just wanted to say that, at least from my perspective, I think it's the most important thing to, in times like these, to have musicians from other places come and bring their culture to us, and to maybe give us some sense of reprieve, or something. And so, just with me setting that up, as just, I plant my flag in the ground that it's very important for, especially right now, for us to have musicians like yourselves from around the world play for us. As a musician coming to the States, just where, I guess, how are you approaching, playing in a place like this that's going through a rough patch, for many of us? How do you
Yeah.
think about that, or keep that in your mind, as you're performing in these very different places? Like, even just politically, Pennsylvania and Seattle
Mm.
are very different places,
Mm.
politically. So yeah, anywhere you want to run with that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's something we've discussed, because you know I'm from Sweden, but the other two in my band, they're from Denmark, and
It's more
when
personal.
it's more personal, maybe. When we're traveling around the world, whether we like it or not, because we play roots music, uh, we become kind of cultural ambassadors,
Hmm.
and people will think about that uh, during the show, because we're going to tell them, like, this is a piece of music from Denmark,
Yep.
you know? So, in terms of the US, I think there is, and we haven't exactly decided how to deal with this. I guess we'll have to see tonight at the show.
Yeah, just see what
Um,
happens.
yeah, well, we're gonna have a meeting
Yeah.
soon,
Of course, of
because
course.
we are kind of expecting some kind of elephant in the room that needs to be addressed,
Yep.
because Denmark has been in, you know, as a topic in the US with the whole Greenland thing, right?
Yeah.
So people are aware of Denmark in a way that they might not have been in the past. And we are coming there, reminding them about Denmark, reminding them about Greenland, reminding them about all the other things that they might, have difficult
Hmm.
feelings about. And, we kind of feel as artists, we need to address it somehow.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the way we want to do it is comfort, showing that it's fine. We are here to make friends, and you're okay as well. I think there's this kind of there's an opportunity to when you travel around the world. I there's a movement, or there's been a movement at least. I guess there still is. People, they don't want to travel too much because of global warming issues, right? They don't
Hmm.
want to spend that
Yep.
CO2. Uh, I, however, do it, and well, I get it. I get the
Hmm.
whole issue with the
Right.
traveling thing, but I think it's super important in this kind of globalized world, increasingly globalized and connected world, that we understand each other. Which is why I think like geography is important in school, right? And history and all of these things. These are important things because we need to understand each other, and culture is absolutely super important. Uh, Ideally, after a show, I'd want some people to think, those Danes, they aren't so bad after all, you know? Because maybe I don't know what impression they got from us in this whole Greenland thing, you
Hmm.
know? Ideally, I want them to think, oh, they're all right. They're nice people, because I'd like to think I'm a nice person. Uh, and I think this kind of translates into other cultural expressions as well, like Mexican food or Korean dramas or
Hmm.
whatever you do. Like, oh, those aren't so bad. Like, I like their food. They're good. They're good.
Yeah. I mean,
So
culture.
it's,
Yep.
yeah, I think that's important, and I
Mhm.
think you have kind of a responsibility in a sense to address it somehow, whether that's kind of subconscious or conscious. You have an opportunity to connect people.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Beautifully said, man. Seriously, thank you for that. The To answer your question, what do Americans think of Denmark? I can't help but think back to that 20-year-old episode of South Park when they referred to Denmark as the Canada of Europe. And so I think that might just sum it up. And then there was that Huga book that got
Oh yeah.
very, very popular. Like even my
Hmm.
dad bought it. Like I went over to my parents' place and they had it on their bookshelf. I was like, "Where'd you get that?" And I noticed it was actually like on one of the bestseller shelves in the Boulder
Mm.
bookstore.
Yeah.
So I think they just associate you guys with like happy and also just
Mm.
like kind of like Canada in a way. But in a more
Yeah.
serious response to what you've brought up here is music and food, of course, just cultural, not material, but expression, cultural
Hmm.
expression in general.
Yeah.
I think is just one of the most powerful ways to relate across those other sorts of divides that might be between
Yeah.
cultures. That's why ethnomusicologists love to really give that term music is the universal language hell. Like for it was a flag in the ground for ethnomusicologists to really try and fight against that term. But I'm actually in the camp that I actually think is it perfectly accurate? No, but it paints a really good picture of how music can actually be used to communicate. And because it's in a lot of ways it is feeling and it's expression, and there is
Mm.
something very simple about, oh, they feel this feeling too, they feel this
Yeah.
emotion too. That I think really does wonders for just like getting people to understand each other across other more solid boundaries like Greenland.
Mm. I agree.
Awesome, man. I mean, red, white, and blue lands, but anyway.
Yeah,
But
I
no,
heard
man.
it. I've heard
Yeah,
that.
yeah, of course. Yeah. So, yeah, man. So, anyway, I just thank you for still touring through the States because it could be just as easy to be like, nope, not touching that. Because it's very important to remember that there are also people here that do
Oh
really
yeah,
rely on that kind of, healing through music and comfort
of
is the word you use.
course. Of course. I mean, we have many friends who live here. I mean, we've not only friends, but audiences and people who enjoy our music, and we enjoy performing for them and meeting them. We have a date tomorrow with our friends in La Jolla. We're gonna go out and drink before we need to drive north. And we enjoy being here,
Mhm.
obviously.
Yep.
And we need to make a living as musicians, and there are many reasons to travel.
Yeah.
uh, you know, uh,
Cool, man. Yeah. So anyway, thank you for still touring, and I think that was a really good conversation to have about just the role that music plays, especially in times like these where things are just a little weird, to put it to put it lightly. It means a lot. It means a lot to the
yeah.
everyday people behind the headlines and stuff like that. So
Mm,
let's talk about Handed On, the Handed On project that I've been following since your very first videos you guys put up with it a couple years ago, and just as a
mm.
little plug.
Oh,
I've got it. I've got it right
you
here.
got it.
Yeah. So this little book is actually I love it, man.
Yeah.
Especially because just as a little introduction from my point of view before you maybe want to say more about it. The Handed On project is, as I've talked about to musicians, you guys, Dreamers Circus really does get referred to a lot as leaders, or maybe leadership
Mm,
figures, or maybe sometimes parental figures
mm,
for the folk music scene. And so I just thought that it was pretty poetic for you guys to sort of commit all of this time and effort into actually making that into a tangible thing where people can learn this new kind of Nordic folk tradition from the people who are trailblazing it and leading it in a lot of
mm,
ways. My personal favorite thing about this book, I love that you guys have it arranged in order in
mhm.
difficulty. Because when I get a big book of Nordic tunes, I feel so defeated when I have to keep flipping through them. I'm like, oh my god, I can't play this
Yep.
either. This is, oh my god, not another whatever pole skill with that rhythm I don't understand. The fact that this, I can open it up and see a linear progression is actually
Exactly.
really inspiring and motivating because I can be like, all right, got this one, next up. Got this one, next up.
And the stickers, am I right?
Yeah, I am not afraid to admit that as an almost 30-year-old man, the stickers lit me up. I love it.
That is the best.
I love the whimsy in this. I bookmarked this is one that made me chuckle. The angry old man or the grumpy little man. This picture you guys have right here of and then the instruction to play it where you say this little man is grumpy. Try playing the tune while imagining this grumpy little man. I love that, dude. This is such a great way to teach people
Yeah.
outside of the typical way of, teaching folk music, especially across, as we're talking about, across borders and cultural boundaries. It's very easy for someone to pick this up and maybe try and attempt it, even if they don't even
Mm,
know where Denmark is on a map.
mhm.
But yeah, so I'll hand it off to you. How did you guys approach this, or how did this idea come about with the Handed On project and making this more of a focused effort of being, more of educators, which you guys have always been in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are many answers to it. There are many reasons
Hmm.
for us to do this project. I mean, one reason is that, as you said, we we didn't know of a similar, book that was made available. Actually, my mother, she made a book with a selection of traditional tunes from my home region of Skåne in Sweden,
Hmm.
which is called Skånelåtar för småspelmän. Actually, that's an excellent book,
Okay.
and it's also been recorded. It's on Spotify, actually, with some really great musicians, including Sofia Karlsson, Jesbjörn Hazelius, some of these good musicians, or I mean, well known, at least.
Yeah, yeah. Love his
uh,
alias especially. Very
yeah,
familiar
yeah,
with their
yeah.
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
So that was for sure an inspiration, and also the whole Suzuki method, which I grew up with, and Rune as well in the band.
Hmm.
And we wanted to make a a book that was with new music, right? Because I feel oftentimes when you kind of scroll through older material, as you say, for one thing is the difficulty. Another thing is kind of relevance, or like relativity. Like if you're able to understand what's the point of this tune? Like, why is this good? No, but
Hmm.
seriously, like I've gone through, as you do, you can go through old stuff, right?
Yeah.
Looking for cool tunes. And quite often you go like, eh, eh, you know, and then like, ooh, that was really good, you know? And the whole thing is often it's kind of out of context, right? Because you're supposed to play this particular tune in this way on this instrument, in this together with this dance or with this social ceremony or whatever. And sometimes it just has or had at least value because of nostalgia or tradition in itself. Like we usually do this, and therefore we like doing this, therefore we want to continue, right?
Hmm.
So uh, I've experienced this myself. We did a collaboration in Roskilde where they published hundreds and hundreds of old tunes that had been found, and I have to admit I did the same thing there.
Yeah.
Like
I feel
several
so.
ch-
I
several
feel
tunes
so
that,
related to.
yeah, right. I'm like what? I don't really like this tune, but it's published in the book, but I don't really like it.
Hmm.
And then we did we were there for the announcement of this book, the release of the book, and we played for dancing, and we played some of these tunes that I didn't really like. And the thing is, because these are kind of heavily choreographed dances, like you need to do 4 steps in this way, 4 steps in that way,
Hmm.
and then you could do like this, and suddenly the music made sense. Suddenly I
Yeah.
was like, come on, this is a great melody, you
Hmm.
know? So that's the thing. Like it needs to have a context because it's not written to be listened to be consumed. This is participatory music. Is that a word?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
music that you're supposed to participate. It's contextually based music.
Hmm.
You can't just put it on paper. You can't just record it and listen to it and enjoy it in the same way as it was supposed to be enjoyed, right?
Hmm.
So this whole thing ties back into one of the reasons why we made the book, because we wanted to make music that we enjoy today, that the three of us, we enjoy in 2022,
Hmm.
you know, uh, meaning with the kind of understanding that we have, with the context that we have, where maybe it's written for jam sessions, maybe it's written for concerts, maybe it's written for these contexts that we have today, with the understanding that we have today. So that's the idea, and this is the process I think every traditional, or in my view, real traditional musician are supposed to be doing, because it's about relating to your roots. It's about playing whatever you feel is relevant for you today in the way you want to do it, and pass on the torch in the way that you want to do it. So kind of that way you guarantee that whatever you pass on is worthy of passing on for you,
Hmm.
right? And this is why lots of these older tunes are so amazing, because they've managed to pass through the filters of so many generations and so many places in the world where they've been traveling around, and they're just too good. They can handle most things, and yeah. So that's one of the reasons why we did the book. Other reasons are more practical ones. Is we there was a pandemic, we couldn't travel, we needed some work.
Hmm.
We had funding to do stuff, so we did this project. um yeah, and okay, yeah, I guess that's it.
Yeah, man. So I really related to what you were talking about, how, sometimes a melody can really just die on a page. You're reading it from a page and it just doesn't sing, it doesn't dance, And
Mm.
I actually had that exact experience with Gladloten,
Oh yeah.
where on the page it bored the hell out of me.
Mhm.
I then saw the Roskilde session that you guys did,
Mhm.
and I was like, this is the rhythm that's
It's
supposed to be. I
Yeah,
went right
exactly.
back to it, and I was like, this is my favorite melody now. And it was specifically that performance where I was like, that's amazing. Now I know
Hmm.
I get it. That was my I get it moment for a melody, was actually
Hmm.
hearing it played by people who know how it should go. And I'm even
Hmm.
looking at the transcription on the page. I'm like, this isn't the rhythm.
Hmm.
Because it's very hard to write that rhythm
It
down.
is. It
Um,
is. Yeah.
but but anyway, no, because so I directly relate to that issue of, yeah, the gesture you were doing of making a face at the page every time you turn it. But no, I love that you were keeping that in mind, and because it is effective. And I also did not make the connection with the Suzuki method. I should have, but
Hmm.
now that you say it, I'm like, it's the Suzuki method for folk music. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also a specific reason, where in Denmark we're actively working on making people aware of folk music because people they don't really know that it exists and they don't have that it's not accessible for them.
Hmm.
They don't know how to find it, where to find it. So this is an attempt to make it more accessible for in music schools, for example. So
Hmm.
because Suzuki method and similar methods, there are several, obviously,
Hmm.
are established, common, people know them. And the way that this book could be integrated is like a teacher is, working on a piece of music and the kid is kind of, getting a bit tired of it, not really
Hmm.
progressing that fast. Then throw in one of these tunes and you're good to go. You get some more energy and because they're typically, quite easy, no, not necessarily easygoing, but um, difficult in a different way
Yeah.
than some classical repertoire might be.
Oh yeah.
Um, so yeah, can be as a refresher as the ginger in the sushi dish.
I was about to use a very similar metaphor. No, but
Yeah.
excellent, excellent. Yeah, so I guess before we move into the album, I kind of wanted to hear your perspective. Um, I've been a fan of you guys forever, like your music. It's been a cornerstone of my Nordic listening journey. And
Mm,
as I've developed this Nordic Sound thing into something that reviews music, I'm listening to music, especially from Denmark, very often, where I hear so much Dreamers Circus in the sound. And then I also then have musicians, note that you guys are these, leader figures or parental figures in a lot of ways. And I guess what I want to give you a chance for is, I guess, if anyone's listening, maybe if a young Danish musician is listening or Swedish musician is listening, and they're trying to sort of make their own way in folk music, do you have like any advice or guidance that you would just give them right off the bat for people who might be inspired by you, to maybe where to go from there?
you mean creatively?
Yeah, creatively, or yeah, any, or no, if you have like financial advice, like, yeah, but yeah, yeah,
Get an
creatively.
accountant. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Uh, yeah, I mean, or sorry, do you mean someone who's an amateur and wants to be an amateur, or someone who wants to be a professional?
Let's say professional.
Yeah. So I think what's important for any creative person is that you keep on moving so that I mean, it's tempting to think that, okay, this is folk music, this is traditional roots music, that it's supposed to be something in particular, right? You're supposed to copy something to convey something that has been, and that's your job. And if you don't do that, then you're messing up, right?
Hmm.
There is an issue of it can be an issue of cultural appropriation
Hmm.
sometimes like
Hmm.
but for me I grew up with traditional music. I am a traditional musician. This is how I identify.
Hmm.
um I feel I'm allowed to do whatever I want, uh you know because I know the real thing. um But my advice would be anyway to stay curious and avoid pitfalls like where you get stuck creatively. Continue challenging yourself to do something that you're not used to doing. Try to write music in a way you haven't done before. arranging in a different way, play your instrument a different way, whatever you can do to keep moving, you know.
Hmm.
Because I think that's when, in my experience, when music or bands or concerts uh, risk getting boring, you know.
Yeah,
Like
very
if,
well
if you
said.
do if you do the same thing,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I would say so. So something we do is we experiment a lot. Like
Hmm.
that's the whole artistic vision for our
Yeah, yeah.
band. You know, that with the whole idea is we keep on moving, and that in itself is the goal. If we make the same album again, you know, that's the end.
Yeah, you're
You
dead. You're
know,
dead in the water.
yeah, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be a better album. You know,
Hmm.
like this is, I don't know how many albums we made at this point, but we made a few, and we hear sometimes when we release a new album that they go, oh, you know, it's the older ones are better, or
Always.
I like the previous one more.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm actually fine with that
Hmm.
because, you know, they can always listen to the old albums if they want to, right?
Hmm.
And I think just the fact that they don't like it as much, that's kind of proof that it's different. So that in itself is a win. Um, and because this is not a testament of who we are. It's more like this is some pieces of music in
Hmm.
a compact disc format. Here you go. And this is just representing a little part of what we do. Like when we play concerts, we're discussing the set list for tonight
Hmm.
at the flight yesterday, actually, and it's a compilation of all sorts of stuff. Like we have
Hmm.
some tunes that are 10 years old, like from our repertoire. We have some traditional music. We have some stuff from the new album, obviously. We have some stuff for our next album that we've recorded, but
Awesome.
not released. And so we're always moving. Like we never stop. That's the whole point, because
Yeah.
that keeps it exciting.
Yeah, beautifully said, man. And I also remember, when I was hosting that talk with Runa when they were in Denver a few weeks ago. I asked him, sort of, you excited for the new album? And his response was so funny to me. He was like, some of these songs are like 2 years old. I kind of just want to do something new. So I
Yeah,
just love how like that
yeah,
even just comes through and just like chatting with you guys. It's
yeah,
always
yeah,
something
yeah.
new. And I completely agree with you. I've what I actually like about what I love about you guys is the fact that I never know what you're going to do next. Like I
Hmm.
might personally really have loved Blue White Gold because of actually just the place I was in when I was listening to it. There's a lot of
Hmm.
nostalgia in that record for me. That doesn't necessarily mean that whenever you guys do a new album, I'm going to be thinking, well, it's not Blue White Gold. It's not that sort of thing, because instead, there's something different in all of these albums that
Hmm.
really shows that restlessness in a
Hmm.
good way to always be trying something different. And I remember in the first interview we did, that whole idea of it being a circus of
Hmm.
dreamers just trying something new, doing new tricks, and all of that is very evocative. Um,
Hmm.
and then, of course, this also segues really nicely into maybe just using the last chunk of time we have to just talk about the album
Yeah.
itself.
Hmm.
So when you're taking this project that is at this point a few years old for you guys, but it's brand new to us. What was your Probably a lot of answers to this, but what was your approach in taking these 58 tunes and making an album out of them? Like, even
Hmm.
first off, having to choose just a CD's worth out of that many.
Hmm.
Sort of what did you guys have in mind when you decided to make an album out of these tunes?
Well, um, it's I think we are a band that typically goes in phases, like
Hmm.
artistically. So we're occupied by something, you know,
Hmm.
and then that gets boring. And then we move on to something, or not necessarily boring, but it's more like something else catches our
Yeah,
interest,
I know what you
right?
meant. I know what you meant.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So we just keep on moving, and sometimes it gets into a cycle sometimes
Hmm.
with us moving further and further away until we kind of go back to our foundation or our roots sometimes, which is
Hmm.
the more traditional sound, or like not necessarily sound, but tune-based,
Hmm.
maybe even dance-based music,
Hmm.
all of that kind of stuff. Um, so I think uh, we made the book, and obviously that's something that takes a lot of time in our or a space
Hmm.
in our heads, right? So it's music that we want to play, and we play it for our concerts. We make arrangements, and it just felt like we had so much music now that we want to record it on an album, and it felt like an appropriate thing to kind of do you say milestone?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that as a term in Scandinavia. So it's where this is where we are at the moment,
Hmm.
or at least where we have been, um, as a timestamp
Hmm.
um, of our band. We're already way ahead. Now we're into I don't know. We made a big dance project which we wrote music for and
Oh
performed.
yeah,
So
I remember seeing that. Yeah, yeah. The
yeah,
the,
so
the
that's
promo for it. Yeah.
yeah, it's like Fair is pretty challenging stuff. That's where we are right now. So
Yeah.
this is actually something completely different already. But anyway, this music I in the album felt appropriate because it kind of underlines our roots, it underlines the whole oral tradition, story of continuity and
Hmm.
transmission and relay race, and something we wanted to pay our respects to. Also, it's also just an example, I guess, of
Hmm.
um, that the book is the tunes,
Hmm.
um, and the album is just a way to interpret the tunes.
Hmm.
And it's also, I guess, in a way, something we want to encourage people to do themselves. Like, if you want to play it, it can sound like this, you know, and it can sound like this as well. We
Hmm.
recorded all 58 music videos of every single tune, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you for
yeah, I
that.
appreciate it. It was really hard work.
I imagine.
Uh, yeah, we regretted it so many times, but
I was
we,
wondering. I was actually kind of for
yeah,
myself, but with no understanding of what order you recorded them in.
yeah,
I was kind of asking myself, like, I wonder what number is sort of like the sheen wears off, and you have to move from like that Mozart inspiration into the Beethoven hard work part of it,
yeah,
where
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. We did it. We
yeah,
did
you
it,
did it,
and
and
we
that
when
that is
we're
what matters.
and we're happy we did. But
Good.
I don't know, for those of you who want to, you can have a listen to the pieces on YouTube and compare it to the album version. And
Hmm.
that is the kind of creative process that it's an example of the creative
Hmm.
process we would usually have when we present it in a concert fashion or album fashion,
Hmm.
rather than just playing the tunes, which in terms of the handed-on book and videos, it's more like just us playing the tunes. It's not necessarily processing it or arranging it in any sort of special manner.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's an example of how it can transcend maybe
Yeah.
into an arrangement.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, awesome, man. I mean, yeah, just off the top of my head, I know that like in the handed on videos, it is Nikolai who leads, I think, the Great Sea, which you end up beginning on the Citron on the album. So I remember
Right.
that was like a little difference that I noticed. I was like, oh, I wonder if they changed it, but now it's like hearing that it's an intentional way of just doing it differently. Yeah, excellent, man. Great point to be
Yeah,
made musically. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, not necessarily that it has to be different, but
Yep.
it's just the kind of process and this level of freedom. I think
Hmm.
it's important. This level of artistic freedom that, yeah, it's a tune, sure, but it can sound like this, and that's okay. You
Hmm.
know, that's the thing. It's okay. To some people, some music might be you know sacred in a way,
Hmm.
like
Yeah, yeah.
don't mess with this music or don't
Hmm.
mess with this tune, uh but in with these tunes, these are our tunes. We made them, and they are made for you. You
Hmm.
know, it's the whole idea that it's tradition, it's sound that has been handed on to us, and we are now handing it on to someone else. You know, that's the whole idea.
Hmm.
Um, and we also, just to mention, an artistic idea with the album was our producer, Christian Litt, who is a long-term friend of ours. He was part of, we did a symphony orchestra project back in 2011 with Copenhagen Philharmonic, which is also up on YouTube, actually. Uh, and Rune, he was a concertmaster in that orchestra at the time, or did he quit already? Anyway, it was around
They're
that
always
time.
cycling through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And Christian, he was the conductor for the project. He wasn't actually conducting for the shows, but he was called the conductor because he was there during rehearsals and in the process of making the music or the set list and the artistic idea of the show. So we've been good friends with him since, and he's been after us, saying he wants to relive. We had a jam session during that tour, actually. We went to a bar and we were just playing like madmen in this bar. And he was there in the middle and he was like, whoa, this is cool. And
Mhm.
he, ever since, he's been wanting to relive that kind of spark.
He's been chasing
Uh,
that high.
he's been chasing the high. Yeah. And this is his attempt, I guess, where he wanted us to record in this way, these tunes in this order, and with this sound, this mix, where he tries his very best to, you know, bring bring you back to that context
Hmm.
rather than, I mean, because yeah, like I said, we do these travels, right? So we've done the rooftop sessions is a good example of something
Hmm.
that's kind of grandiose
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, and etc. And we've done all these different things. So now in this case, we recorded everything close together in the same room, barely any dubs,
Hmm.
no kind of edits. Like
Hmm.
typically, you edit quite a lot,
Yeah, yeah.
um, and but in this case, it's pretty raw. There are several things that we might call, unintentional,
Hmm.
that we might have corrected otherwise, that we've kept in because it's then and there, and that's the whole artistic idea of the album as well, which is an interesting experience for us also.
It's a whole new
You,
challenge.
it's a new challenge,
Letting
actually.
go of that level of control that you're used to having over your more
Yeah,
like, grandiose stuff.
exactly. I am a control freak. That's the way
Hey
I
man,
am.
right there with you. I'm right there with you.
I wanted to be as good as possible.
Yeah.
So, and this was the first time we recorded an album with a producer. Normally, we just do it ourselves, like we produce it ourselves. So
Hmm.
it was really nice to be able to just sit back and Christian saying, "This is amazing. Let's go with that." And I'm like, but, and he's like, "No, this is great." You know,
Oh, dude, I feel that. I feel that
yeah,
so much. Like, I'll show something to to my wife or something that I record,
yeah.
and she's like, "Great, release it." And I'm like, "This is a draft. No, I would never." Right? Like, just no, I couldn't. That was why when you messaged me that, "Hey man, you put up the wrong video," I was like, "No, no, my worst nightmare." That was like literally, I was sitting here like my control freak. I was like, "There's no
Yeah,
way I let that slide." But
exactly.
no, man, yeah. So we're out of time here, and I want to honor the time, the
Mm,
window that you gave me. So I might just have you back on in the future to talk about the music you're doing with the incomparable Olav Mjølva and Eric Rudvall,
oh yeah.
who I have also been a huge fan of. Forever, just incredible musicians and yourself too. So
Mm,
when I first saw that little teaser video you guys put up of you guys jamming together, I was sitting
mm.
here like, no way. This is a dream come true. But we'll talk about that maybe at a different time,
Yeah.
when you don't have the constraints of touring and whatnot. So Ala, it has been really great having you back on. It's kind of like a homecoming for me to have you back, where this all started. And so, yeah, as I said, thank you so much for coming on the channel, making time out of your busy touring schedule to talk about the album. If people want to learn more about the album or follow you, where can they do so?
So my website, I guess, is probably best, dreamercircus.com. And for the book, there's also just handedon.com.
Hmm.
And it's also linked from our website. So I think that's probably the best bet.
Cool. Sounds good, man. Yeah. And so I'm actually going to be putting this interview up today. So
Mm,
and I'll be promoting the tour with it again, trying to get that Pacific Northwest audience out and
amazing.
moving, maybe to experience you guys firsthand, which I'm very jealous of. I know Denver's not the easiest place to add as a stop to a tour because we're just in the middle of
Mm,
nowhere, but maybe someday. But
I hope
anyway,
so.
man, yeah. So stick around after I just stop the record button, and otherwise, thank you so much for coming back, man. And you take care. Have a great tour.
Thanks, man. Thank you.